All right, welcome back here to Live Now from Fox. I'm Andy Mack. Let's talk more about now President-elect Donald Trump and what the election means for the criminal cases, as we learned new developments out of New York City today as the Manhattan DA, they opposed the dismissal of this hush money conviction, but they are open to delaying the sentencing. I do want to put up a post from Time saying New York prosecutors, they oppose any effort to dismiss the President-elect Donald Trump's hush money conviction, but they expressed some openness on Tuesday to delaying sentencing until after the impending second term. That's in the court filing as the Manhattan District Attorney's Office says Trump's forthcoming presidency isn't grounds for dropping a case that was already tried. So let's learn more about this and what it means for Trump moving forward. I want to be joined right now by attorney, friend of the program, Jeremy Rosenthal. Jeremy, thank you so much for joining us here on Live Now from Fox. And of course, they are opposing a dismissal, but soon could Trump not be a convicted felon anymore?
What they want to do is kind of on sort of the extraordinary side. What they want to do here is they want to delay the sentencing indefinitely, which, think about it like this. A criminal trial is what is called bifurcated. That means that there are two parts. The first part is the guilt-innocence phase. And then once the guilt-innocence phase is over, we go into a punishment phase if it's a guilty verdict. And the judge sentences the defendant. It's usually very automatic. One is right after the other. Usually these things happen on the same day or the same week or the same month. But I don't believe there's any law that says you can't kick the can for 4 or 5 years down the road. That's what the prosecutors in New York want to do. Donald Trump team's almost certainly going to want to oppose that.
All right, very, very interesting. All right, Jeremy, as we're continuing to discuss this, you mentioned the kicking the can down the road, so to speak. And what is the likelihood that we revisit this in 4 years' time? Is that a real possibility?
It's a real possibility. I think the things that are at the judge's disposal right now, number one, he could toss this case entirely. I don't think that's going to happen. The second thing is he could reverse the conviction, grant Donald Trump a new trial, in which case you wouldn't think that that would happen until after he left the White House. The third thing he could do is sentence him now, probably or potentially put him on some kind of probation while he's the president. Or this is the fourth option, just revisit the whole thing when it's done. The issue is that Donald Trump's team is going to want to have intermediate appeal in that time.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's kind of interesting because as we talked about throughout this process, through the trial, the conviction, the unprecedented nature of it, and I do want to ask you because several other of the legal minds that we bring on here, Nima Rahmani, posted on social media that in New York, it's different, that a conviction is not final until a defendant has been sentenced. If your understanding of that, what do you make of that, and how does it differentiate between states, and how is New York unique?
Okay, this is actually a very technical point, but a correct point. What happens is you are not a convicted felon based on what venue you're in or what jurisdiction you're in, sometimes until your appeal comes back. That's the way it is in Texas, or obviously as stated in New York State. It's a bit of a technical differentiation, though, because think of it like this. A lot of times it's important to define somebody as a convicted felon or not of a convicted felon for the purposes of what's called enhancement. You heard of 3 strikes and you're out. Yep. So in other words, if a defendant has been to the penitentiary once, gets out, and gets charged again, then it's important whether or not they are finally convicted. Correct. Otherwise, it's sort of a meaningless distinction, but technically I think she...
All right, very good, Jeremy. And I do want to ask you, because we talk about this case, and of course, as I led into it, as prosecutors, they are not open. They don't want the dismissal of this case, but they're opening to a delay. That feels like a gray area. Does that hurt them in any way with the judge?
It's absolutely a gray area. I don't know that it hurts them with Judge Merchan. I think Judge Merchan is probably going to be all for this because I don't think Judge Merchan wants to disrupt Donald Trump's second presidency. The courts of appeal, the higher up courts in New York, they may have an issue with it. And Donald Trump could certainly appeal that and say, wait, hold on. You can't keep me in limbo land like this for 4 years, 5 years. That violates my due process, whether I'm the president of the United States or not. The issue is whether Donald Trump is going to be able to move to higher courts to appeal this in the next 4 or 5 years. That's going to be the major issue, because what Donald Trump wants to do is he wants the higher courts to revisit this conviction in light of the immunity opinion that was issued this summer, namely a lot of the testimony that came about from when he was in the Oval Office. That's what the Supreme Court over the summer came back and said, you can't consider those things.
All right. So
does it infect and ruin the entire conviction? That's the issue. Sorry,
right.
Andy.
No, you're good. You're good. Continue on, because they're so very interesting that we talk about this, and we're talking about it in real time in fluid motion, and we're just kind of trying to react to what's happening. And I do ask you, because we're talking about not dismissal. Merchan's going to make a decision in the coming weeks, but we know inauguration is not that far off. We have the holidays in the way. If this gets a decision not made next week, as it gets closer to inauguration, how much up against a wall is the legal system, is Merchan in this case?
I think you're exactly right. I mean, time is running out, and at some point, there's going to have to be a decision that's made. Today was the deadline that he gave the prosecution to tell them what they wanted to do. They've done that. Now it's the ball's back in the judge's court. And again, he's got those 4 options. He can reverse this case, throw it out entirely. I don't see a whole lot of legal reason for that. If he's going to do anything to disrupt this verdict, he could grant Donald Trump a new trial, basically saying, listen, you're right. In light of the new Supreme Court ruling, the jury should not have heard those things about the Oval Office. Now, in Judge Merchan's defense, these rulings came after the trial, so he didn't know that. But that could be grounds for a new trial to roll the thing back and to do it again. Or, like we were talking about before, he could put Donald Trump on probation now, make him take anger management while he's in the White House. We could see how that goes, right? Or if everybody just agrees, look, we'll just revisit this thing in 2029. And Donald Trump's team's made it clear they don't like that. But that could certainly be a bit of a loophole that the judge sort of jumps through here. The law doesn't say, when we have that bifurcated trial, the law doesn't say necessarily that you got to sentence him the next day or the next week or the next month or the next year or apparently the next 5 years. So we are sort of operating in this void.
Yeah, and can I ask you, before I let you go, one other possibility, because we were also talking to Nima Rahmani about this, and we all talked in different legal minds, said it was unlikely that Trump would find himself behind bars, any jail time for this conviction, but there might be a fine, probation, different things. Could Merchan still sentence him, maybe something like a fine? Is that possible, happening next week or the week after, sometime before the inauguration?
Potentially, yes, but I also agree that it's unlikely. Okay. Again, as far as confinement goes, the district attorney's office, Alvin Bragg's office, has been very clear that they do not want to stand in the way of Donald Trump's presidency. You've got a district judge in New York whose job it is to run a courtroom, right? Get people to lunch and the jurors to lunch on time, to make sure that people who are robbing liquor stores are doing their community service. And now he has the ability legally to jail the leader of the free world. So this is certainly very unique. But again, nothing to indicate that these types of things could happen. I have to tell clients, look, you could go to prison for the rest of your life. Then again, I could get hit by a bus when I leave here in a few minutes. There's things that are possible and things that are unlikely. I think it's highly, highly unlikely that something like that happens.
Yeah, what is possible, necessarily not probable. So we'll see what happens. We'll see what is ruled on in this case. But like you said, so much unique, so much unprecedented about this. Jeremy Rosenthal, it's great to talk with you after quite some time. We appreciate it.